All right, so we're all about exploring the fringes of the digital world today, like where the ones and zeros meet real power, real money, and very real consequences.
Yeah, today's deep dive is a wild ride through the underbelly of the internet. We're talking about cybercrime empires, the kind that rose fast, grabbed fortunes, and then crashed and burned just as spectacularly.
And we've got three cases, three stories that basically rewrote the rulebook on cybercrime. First, you've got Kim.com, Megaupload. Anyone remember the chaos that unleashed on the entertainment industry?
Oh, yeah.
Then there's a Silk Road Bitcoin heist, this mind-blowing story of Jimmy Zhong, a guy who exploited a system that was supposed to be unbreakable.
Talk about a story for the ages.
And finally, we get to Alphabay. Picture this. A true digital empire rises from the ashes of its predecessors, only to get taken down in an operation so complex it spanned the globe.
It's like something straight out of a movie.
So rewind back to, say, 2010, 2011, streaming services as we know them, they're barely a blip on the radar. And then comes Megaupload, this platform that let you share like huge e-files with anyone, movies, music, software, you name it. Game changer.
It was the place to go for digital storage.
Yeah.
And yeah, sharing was kind of its thing. Of course, the problem was all this sharing was happening in a very legal gray area.
Right, because the entertainment industry, they saw Megaupload as this haven for piracy. And at the center of it all was this, well, this flamboyant character, Kim Dotcom, not exactly known for being low-key.
Oh, absolutely not. Dotcom, he was living the dream, right? Mansion in New Zealand, those legendary parties, talk about flaunting it.
It sounds like he was almost daring the authorities to come after him.
Well, his whole argument was that Megaupload was just a platform, like a digital locker, what people did with the files they stored. His business, right?
A convenient argument when you've got, what, millions upon millions of users?
180 million at its peak. Huge chunk of internet traffic all flowing through Megaupload. But eventually, the feds caught up. The site got shut down, Dotcom was arrested, whole thing was a wild ride.
And it really kicked off this whole debate about copyright, internet freedom, all of that. But let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the dark web, because that's where things get even more interesting. And that's where Silk Road comes in. It was like the Wild West of the internet, this haven for anonymity and, let's be honest, illegal goods.
Yeah, Silk Road, it was the eBay of the dark web, really. Drugs, weapons, you name it, you could buy it there.
Yeah.
And it all ran on Bitcoin, completely untraceable. The anonymity was possible because of Tor, this network that makes it basically impossible to track users. Try policing that.
Seriously. So how do you even begin to police something like that? Sounds like an impossible task. It almost makes you wonder if the authorities had just thrown their hands up in the air and said, well, we give up.
It was a whole new world for law enforcement. But that's where Jimmy Zhong comes into the picture. He was a programmer who saw a way to crack Silk Road's system, a system everyone thought was impenetrable. He exploited a flaw in their withdrawal system and managed to siphon off a ridiculous amount of Bitcoin, like 50,000 Bitcoins.
50,000? Wow. Even today, that's an insane amount of money.
It was unheard of back then. The guy basically pulled off one of the biggest heists in history, and he did it all with a few lines of code.
And I bet that sent shockwaves through the dark web. Suddenly, even in this anonymous space, people realized they were vulnerable.
It was a huge wake-up call, not just about the security of cryptocurrency, but about the illusion of anonymity online. You might think you're invisible, but there's always someone, somewhere, who can see you.
And in the aftermath of Silk Road's fall, a new type of cybercriminal emerges, right? Which brings us to Alphabay.
Exactly. Alphabay, it's like Silk Road 2.0. It took everything Silk Road did and amplified it, learned from its mistakes, beefed up its security, went global. Alphabay became this massive enterprise, dwarfing Silk Road in scale and scope.
Wow, so it wasn't just a marketplace, it was an empire. So what were people buying? Was it the same stuff as Silk Road, or was it something completely different?
It was more. Sure, you could get the drugs, the weapons, all the usual suspects. But Alphabay was more sophisticated. It was like the Amazon of the dark web. We're talking stolen credit cards, counterfeit IDs, the works. If you could think of something illegal, chances are you could find it on Alphabay.
It sounds like a logistical nightmare. How do you even begin to dismantle something that vast and that well organized?
It took a massive global effort. It involved law enforcement agencies from multiple countries all working together to infiltrate and take down Alphabay. It was a complex operation, and it showed just how difficult it is to police the dark web.
So in, a little over a decade, we've gone from fighting piracy and file sharing to navigating the dark web and dismantling these massive online criminal empires. It's incredible how much things have changed and how quickly.
And the scary part is, it's only going to get more complicated. Technology is evolving faster than ever. Who knows what kind of new threats, what kind of sophisticated schemes are being cooked up right now?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's like a game of cat and mouse, and the stakes just keep getting higher. And that, I think, is something for everyone to think about. As we become more and more reliant on technology, as we spend more and more time in the digital world, we need to be aware of the risks, because the line between the digital world and the real world, while that line is getting blurrier by the day.
And with the rise of AI and the metaverse and all this new tech, it's anybody's guess what the future of cybercrime looks like. But one thing's for sure, it's going to be a wild ride. Ever heard of a custom-made bed flown in from Sweden? No, me neither. Not until Dotcom, that is.
Oh.
Yeah, picture this. New Zealand mansion, like multiple pools, garage full of supercars.
Yeah.
Early 2000s tech millionaire, but like on another level.
Sounds lavish.
Totally. But the thing about .com, it isn't just the money, it's the story. Like, what makes someone rename themselves .com and then actually live like that?
Well, it does make you wonder. His story, it's like something out of Hollywood. Starts as this teenage hacker, Germany, gets in trouble, obviously, but then uses those skills, his hacking skills, to become like a cybersecurity consultant.
So it's like, you caught me hacking payphones, now hire me to stop other people from doing it.
Yeah, basically. Early 90s, this is Kim Schmitz still, before the name change. He was playing around with these office phone networks, PDX systems, figured out how to, well, basically reroute calls and then charge companies for it.
Clever, but
not exactly legal, no.
Not at all. Okay, so already pushing boundaries. But then he gets hired by Data Protect. They were one of the first white hat cybersecurity places, right?
Exactly. The good guys.
Finding the holes so they could get patched up.
Right. He got paid to show companies how vulnerable they were. By hacking them, of course.
Still hacking. I mean, talk about turning a weakness into a strength, I guess.
He had a real knack for it, anticipating vulnerabilities, which when you're using it ethically, it's incredibly valuable.
For sure. Although, even with that legitimate success, you can tell he still sort of craved the spotlight.
How so?
Like, come on. The name change, .com.
Yes.
Pictures of his lifestyle everywhere. He wanted to be the .com era larger than life.
He definitely understood branding, that's for sure.
Okay.
He claimed it was about inspiration, like a Bill Gates or Steve Jobs figure. But hard to ignore, all that flashiness, it attracted a certain kind of attention, too.
And things get even wilder from there. I mean, his time as a .com investor, there's that whole thing in Thailand, luxury hotel suite, some shady investments, almost like he was heading for trouble,
His time in Thailand, yeah, that was a turning point, looking for a fresh start after some setbacks. And he found it in New Zealand with Megaupload.
Okay, so we're finally getting to Megaupload, but that's a story for part 2. So fresh start, New Zealand, Megaupload.
It's kind of funny, right? Like, thinking back to how hard it was to share files back then. Oh, totally. I mean, pre-Dropbox, pre-cloud storage. It was a different world.
You try to email, like, a movie file or something and
yeah.
Forget it. So Megaupload, it was a big deal because it just made that easy.
It was revolutionary for its time. Suddenly you could upload and share these massive files, no problem.
Super user-friendly.
Exactly.
But of course, easy file sharing. It's like opening Pandora's box, right? Piracy was huge back then.
The Wild West of the internet, for sure.
So how did they deal with that whole copyright thing? That seems like a minefield.
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Megaupload, their stance was always that they were just a platform.
A hosting platform.
Right. Like, they're not responsible for what users upload any more than a library is responsible for every book on the shelves.
And they did take down stuff where they were told to, right? Didn't the Wired article say they'd honored something like 30 million takedown requests?
They did. They complied with the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, take down the infringing content when notified.
Okay, so they were following the rules. So what was the issue?
Well, the U.S. government, and in particular the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America, they argued that Megaupload's whole business model, it actually encouraged people to infringe on copyright.
How so?
Well, think about it. Faster download speeds for paying users. What does that incentivize?
I see. So it's not just piracy itself. It's about the platform, like almost encouraging it.
Exactly. And that's where it gets legally interesting, because it all hinges on this idea of Secondary copyright infringement.
Secondary copyright infringement.
Yeah, like can a platform be held liable for what its users are doing, even if the platform itself isn't directly doing the infringing?
And this was all brand new legal territory.
Oh, yeah. First time this was being tested in criminal court. Hence the whole, dramatic raid on Dotcom's mansion.
Helicopters, the whole 9 yards.
Had to make an example out of him, right?
Right. I mean, remember that panic room they found him in?
Oh, yeah.
Like something out of a movie?
They were worried he'd try to destroy evidence, maybe even like remotely wipe Megaupload servers.
High stakes.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just in New Zealand either. This was a coordinated thing. They hit Megaupload servers all over the world, same time.
Wow. Okay, so they were serious. So that image, right? Dotcom's mansion, the raid, talk about a show of force. But then New Zealand gets involved, and it's not like the U.S. had it easy.
Oh, not at all. New Zealand, they were not happy about how the U.S. handled this whole thing. Felt like a real breach of trust.
Like they'd gone too far.
Well, there were definitely questions about the legality of it all. But then it comes out that New Zealand's own intelligence agency, they'd been spying on Dotcom.
Wait, what? New Zealand was spying for the U.S.?
Yep. Huge scandal, allegations of illegal spying, questions about the evidence against Dotcom. It became a diplomatic nightmare.
Wow. So all this drama, what was the final verdict? Did they ever drag Dotcom back to the U.S.?
That's the kicker. He's still in New Zealand to this day, fighting extradition every step of the way. Years of legal battles, millions of dollars spent by the U.S. government, and he's never actually stood trial there.
Not kidding. And Megaupload itself,
Yeah.
gone.
Oh, yeah, completely dismantled. Domains seized, servers shut down, assets frozen. The U.S. government made sure of that.
Message sent, I guess.
Absolutely. A warning to the entire tech world.
It's almost like Shakespearean, this whole thing. You've got Dotcom, right? Teenager doing the hacking thing. Then he's legit cybersecurity. Then he's Kim Dotcom, living the high life, pushing the limits of what the internet could do. And then, boom. Makes you wonder, was he a visionary who flew too close to the sun? Or was it all calculated?
It's hard to say for sure what was going on in his head, but you have to remember what it was like back then. The early 2000s, the internet was still so new. Copyright law, online content, it was all so blurry. He might have been reckless, but it forced everyone to confront some big questions we're still asking today.
Especially now with AI, right? Like anyone can create, share, remix. Where's the line? When is a platform not just a platform anymore, but actually responsible for what's on it? This whole deep dive, and it makes you think about where we're headed with online stuff. What really got to you about all this?
I think what stands out to me is how much Dotcom's case exposed the limits of our legal systems trying to keep up with the internet. Whether you think he's some kind of hero or a total villain, it forced a rethink. How do we balance the rights of creators, artists, whoever with freedom online? Those are tough questions, and with tech moving so fast, they're only getting tougher.
It's like Dotcom threw a wrench in the gears, and we're all still feeling the shakeup. Who knows what's next, right? AI, whatever else is coming down the line. Maybe even new Dotcoms waiting for their moment. Kind of a mind-blowing thought.
Definitely makes you wonder what the future holds.
It does. Well, on that note, we'll leave you all to ponder the wild world of Kim Dotcom.
Ever heard those stories? The ones about people stumbling into crazy money, like finding a winning lottery ticket they forgot they bought. Well, get ready, because today's deep dive is about one of those stories, the story of Jimmy Zhong and a Bitcoin fortune he almost missed. You guys send us some really interesting stuff on this one, even a transcript in Spanish, which is wild, but let's start at the beginning.
Yeah, what's fascinating about Jimmy's story is how it lines up with the whole Bitcoin timeline. Picture this. It's 2009. Bitcoin is this new, strange thing on the internet. And Jimmy, a bit of an outsider himself, stumbles right into it.
Right. We're talking about a guy who practically lived online. Computers were his thing, especially back in those awkward teenage years. He was an immigrant kid on the autism spectrum, so the internet, computers, that was his comfort zone. Almost like it was meant to be, him and Bitcoin right at the start.
Totally. He starts mining Bitcoin from his college dorm, which back then was like having a money printer nobody else knew about.
Okay, hold up. Mining. For those of us who aren't fluent in crypto, what's that even mean?
So imagine solving puzzles But instead of a crossword, it's your computer doing the work and the prize. Bitcoin. Back in 2009, those puzzles were a piece of cake. So people like Jimmy were racking up thousands of Bitcoins with just their laptops.
No way. So easy back then.
Oh, yeah. Totally different story now, though. These days, you need serious computing power.
Wow, so Jimmy's sitting on this mountain of Bitcoin and then what? He just forgets about it.
Yep, pretty much. It's mind-blowing,
Okay.
right? Puts his laptop away, life goes on, Bitcoin becomes a distant memory. Until, of course, the price explodes. Suddenly, those forgotten coins are worth, well, let's just say life-changing money.
Man, that's insane. Okay, so did he freak out trying to get those Bitcoins back from that old laptop?
He did try, but there's this whole other layer of mystery there. A damaged hard drive, lost passwords, the whole shebang, like a digital treasure hunt with no map.
Okay, that's both cool and frustrating. So what's next for Jimmy? Does this Bitcoin roller coaster scare him off, or does it pull him deeper?
Let's just say he gets pulled in. Jimmy, now using the very intriguing username MB300 Air 2, which, by the way, is a nod to his dream car, a Mercedes-Benz.
Of course, gotta have a dream car.
Right. So he dives headfirst into those Bitcoin forums, those online communities. And remember, this is a guy who thrives in online spaces. For him, it wasn't just about the car. It was about belonging, about success.
Ah, the allure of a sweet ride and a place to fit in. I get it. But what exactly was he doing in those forums? Just chatting about Bitcoin? Or was there more to it?
Well, this is where things get interesting. Remember we talked about those early Bitcoin days being like the Wild West, full of opportunity, but also, let's say, creative ventures.
Oh, I like where this is going. What kind of creative are we talking?
Jimmy, always the entrepreneur, launches this Bitcoin betting platform called BitPony. Now, this wasn't your average online gambling site. From what we can tell, it was structured a lot like a Ponzi scheme.
Okay, so not exactly legal. I'm already seeing some red flags here.
Yeah, and to make things even more complicated, this is all happening during what's called a bear market. Basically, the economy throws a tantrum, prices go haywire, and even Bitcoin, which seemed untouchable, takes a hit. And this timing, it's crucial because it coincides with Jimmy's next move, a move that leads him down a much darker path.
A darker path. Oh, you definitely have my attention. But I guess we'll have to wait for the next part of this deep dive to uncover those secrets. Stay tuned, folks, because this story is about to take a wild turn. Okay, so last we left off, Jimmy, our Bitcoin mining college student turned entrepreneur was knee-deep in this whole BitPony thing, but there were definitely some shadows creeping in.
Right. And those shadows lead us to a name that still sends shivers down the spines of even the most, let's say, tech-savvy folks, Silk Road.
Okay, now I've heard of Silk Road, but for those of us who need a refresher, what was it exactly?
Picture an online marketplace, but instead of, books and clothes, you're browsing for it. Well, let's just say things you wouldn't find on Amazon. The dark underbelly of the internet. Anonymity was the name of the game, and the currency. You guessed it, Bitcoin.
Wow. The Wild West of online marketplaces, with Bitcoin as its currency. Okay, so where does Jimmy fit into all of this? Was he just curious, or did he actually get involved?
Well, remember how Jimmy always felt most comfortable online, away from the judgments and expectations of the real world? Silk Road, with all its darkness, might have held a strange appeal for him. And it was in that digital underbelly, amidst the encrypted messages and hidden transactions, that Jimmy's story really goes off the rails.
Okay, now you've got me on the edge of my seat. What happened? Did he get in over his head?
Let's just say he wasn't just browsing. He found what he was looking for on Silk Road, but it was during one of these transactions, while trying to withdraw his Bitcoin, that things went, well, haywire.
Haywire how? What happened?
So picture this. Jimmy's trying to move his Bitcoin out of Silk Road, and he's clicking through the steps, maybe a little too quickly, when bam, he accidentally double-clicks. But instead of canceling the transaction, it duplicates it. Suddenly, the amount of Bitcoin he thought he had was doubled.
Wait, what? Seriously? He accidentally doubled his Bitcoin? That sounds like something out of a movie. How much are we even talking about here?
A life-changing amount. Enough to make anyone's head spin. Now, there's debate about whether it was a genuine mistake or a more calculated move. We only have Jimmy's word to go on, and let's just say downplaying things would be in his best interest.
Yeah. Accidental double-click sounds a lot better than I might have found a loophole and exploited it. But regardless, he suddenly found himself sitting on a mountain of Bitcoin, right? So what did he do with it?
Well, this is where things get interesting. Remember that Mercedes he was dreaming about, the one that inspired his username?
Right, the MB300 Sequoia. I'm guessing that dream became a reality.
Oh, yeah. And that was just the beginning. We're talking a new house, Extravagant parties, even stories of him giving away phones loaded with Bitcoin. It was like something out of a movie, this sudden, almost unbelievable rise to wealth.
Wow, from college kid to high roller, it makes you wonder what was going through his head. Was it pure excitement or maybe a little bit of fear, knowing that kind of money, especially with a connection to Silk Road, was bound to attract attention?
Exactly. And while Jimmy was living it up, there were others who were starting to connect the dots, piecing together the puzzle of his sudden fortune. And these weren't your average internet detectives. This was the big leagues, the IRS.
Oh, the IRS.
Yeah. This is sounding good. But wait, how did they even catch wind of Jimmy? Was it the Silk Road connection or something else entirely?
That's the thing. It wasn't some sophisticated online operation that brought the feds knocking. It was something far more ordinary, something that happens every day. A home robbery.
A robbery. Okay, now I have to hear this. Okay, so we got Jimmy living the high life, Silk Road is out there somewhere, and then boom, the IRS enters the picture. But it wasn't his online activities that tipped them off, right? It was a home robbery of all things. Yeah, pretty wild. Shortly after Jimmy came into his, let's just say, unique fortune, his house gets hit. The thieves got away with a good chunk of cash and, of course, Bitcoin. Now, for most people, that would be a nightmare. But remember, Jimmy's dealing with a whole different level of wealth here.
Right. He's probably thinking, what's a couple of Bitcoins to a guy with a digital vault full of them? But I have a feeling this didn't go the way he planned.
Not even close. He reports the robbery, like you do, figures it's all routine, great. But a copy of that police report, it ends up on the desk of a very specific IRS agent. This is Trevor Mallon, a bit of a rising star, especially when it comes to cybercrime. This guy, he knows the blockchain like the back of his hand.
Oh boy, talk about bad luck. So Malin, he sees this report and something just doesn't add up.
Exactly. See, even though Jimmy had paid taxes on some of his Bitcoin, the amounts just didn't match the sheer scale of wealth that robbery report suggested. The stolen amount alone was a huge red flag. Mullen knew this wasn't just some lucky investor cashing out. Something much bigger was going on. So he decides to dig deeper, and he brings in a colleague, Sean Magruder, a total whiz when it comes to blockchain analysis.
Okay, so now we've got a cybercrime expert and a blockchain guru teaming up. Things are heating up. What did they find that the regular police missed?
Well, they get a warrant for Jimmy's internet history, and let me tell you, that painted quite a picture. Traces of his Bitcoin forum activity, his little trips to Silk Road, even remnants from the BitPony days. It was all right there.
Wow, talk about a digital trail. But how do you go from internet history to actual Bitcoin? It's not like they could just track credit card charges.
You're right, it's a whole different ballgame. But remember how Jimmy was so quick to invite the police in after the robbery? Well, he does the same thing with the IRS agents, completely clueless that this is no longer about a simple break-in.
Oh, no. He basically invited them right into his, what do we call it, his Bitcoin lair?
Pretty much. So picture this. Jimmy's feeling a bit too confident, giving them the grand tour, even showing off his computer setup. And right there, sitting on his desk, is the key to everything. His hardware wallet.
Okay, hardware wallet. For the uninitiated like myself, what is that exactly?
So most people think of a Bitcoin wallet like an app on your phone, right? But a hardware wallet, it's a physical thing, kind of like a high-tech USB drive, but it stores your cryptocurrency offline. Basically, it's a digital vault that's way harder to hack.
So by showing off his computer, he basically handed them the keys to the kingdom. That's some serious irony right there.
It really is. The agents, they had enough to connect Jimmy to that stolen Silk Road Bitcoin. So they get a warrant, seize the hardware wallet, and just like that, Jimmy's little empire crumbles.
Wow, what a story. So what happens to Jimmy? Does he face the music, or does cooperating with the feds get him a break?
You might be surprised. Jimmy actually got a pretty light sentence, 1 year and a day in prison. Seems like his cooperation, plus the fact that the Bitcoin was originally from illegal activities on Silk Road, well, it worked in his favor.
1 year? For stealing millions in Bitcoin. That does seem, I don't know, lenient.
Right. It really makes you think about how we handle cryptocurrency and the law. Where's the line when it comes to digital money, especially when it's connected to illegal stuff? There's a whole can of worms.
It really is. And what about the stolen Bitcoin itself? Did they manage to recover it all?
Oh yeah, the authorities got into that hardware wallet and eventually auctioned off the Bitcoin. But that's a whole other ethical dilemma, right? Should they have returned the money to the original owners, even though those owners were probably doing shady stuff on Silk Road?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it fair game? It's a debate that's still going on.
Wow. So Jimmy's story isn't just about Bitcoin. It's about ethics, the law, and the wild world of cryptocurrency. It's a story that makes you think, and that's what we're all about here on The Deep Dive. What do you think about Jimmy's story? Was justice served? Hit us up on social media and let us know. Okay, so are you ready to, dive into a story that sounds like it's straight out of a movie?
Sounds intriguing. What have we got?
Well, today we're going deep on Silk Road.
Okay, the Silk Road.
Yeah, but not just the headlines, We're talking about the human side of it all, the stuff that's even crazier than what you see in the news.
I'm all ears.
Okay, so picture this. You've got this Eagle Scout from Texas, right? Total physics whiz, head full of libertarian dreams. And this guy, Ross Ulbricht, he's the mastermind behind Silk Road.
Okay, that's quite a resume. Eagle Scout to ACAS.
Yeah.
Mastermind. It's not exactly the usual path. So where do we even begin with a story like that? What kind of sources do we have to unravel this thing?
Well, the cool thing is we've got our hands on some really interesting stuff. We're talking Ross's actual diary, court documents, and even this deep dive from Wired magazine. And let me tell you, it paints a picture of a guy who was, well, a bit of an enigma, to say the least.
Enigma, huh?
Yeah, I mean, one minute he's graduating with honors, and the next he's growing magic mushrooms and diving headfirst into this world of libertarian economics.
It's interesting how those two things often go together. But for people who might not be familiar with the whole Silk Road thing, can you give us a little background? What exactly was Silk Road?
Oh, right. Yeah. So Silk Road, it was this hidden website, right, on the dark web. And it was basically an anonymous online marketplace, like the Amazon of illegal stuff.
And Ross was the Jeff Bezos of this digital Wild West.
Exactly. And, it all kind of ties back to Ross's libertarian beliefs. He was really into thinkers like Ludwig von Mises, the whole idea of a world with almost zero government interference.
Right. The free market reigned supreme. So he was basically applying that philosophy to, well, everything.
Pretty much. I mean, think about it. Imagine a free market where people could buy and sell absolutely anything. Drugs, weapons, maybe even organs. What do you think?
I mean, it's a fascinating, if not unsettling, thought experiment. A world without regulations. Where do you draw the line?
Exactly. And that's the thing about Silk Road, right? It was this weird mix of a utopian ideal and a total nightmare. This digital Wild West where anything goes, but then where do you draw the line? And how did this Eagle Scout, who from what I've read wasn't even a coding expert, how did he create something as complex and secretive as Silk Road?
Right, because to pull that off, you need serious tech skills.
Right. But that's the thing. He taught himself as he went along.
Wow. Talk about a crash course in coding. He must have been one fast learner.
Seriously. But he was ahead of the curve, This is the early 2010s, and he was all over the dark web using Tor and Bitcoin. I mean, this guy created a system that wasn't just a marketplace. It was its own digital world.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. This wasn't just some online flea market. This was sophisticated, organized, and illegal as hell.
Right. And it all starts with him selling, get this, his homegrown magic mushrooms.
Homegrown. So he's like a digital drug lord with a garden.
Right. But then things just blew up. And before you know it, Silk Road is this multi-million-dollar marketplace. It was attracting all kinds of buyers and sellers.
And I'm guessing it wasn't just magic mushrooms anymore.
Oh, no, we're talking drugs, weapons, stolen data. There were even rumors about, you're not going to believe this, organs being sold on there.
Organs.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's taking things to a whole other level. That's a whole different level of ethical complexity. Where do you even begin to grapple with something like that?
Right. It's a moral minefield.
It really makes you think about the whole idea of a truly free market.
Yeah.
Where's the line? Who decides?
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're not just looking at a crime story here. We're exploring a complex human drama, a tale of ambition, idealism, and the unintended consequences of, like you said, unchecked freedom. But before we go any further, we got to talk about the other big players in this whole thing, the ones trying to bring Ross down.
The feds.
Oh, yeah. And you won't believe some of the stuff they were up to. It's wild to think about, right? This guy, Ross, he's living this double life. One minute he's sipping lattes in San Francisco.
Living the dream.
Right. And the next he's running this massive online black market.
Talk about a side hustle.
Seriously. But that's what I'm wondering, right? Silk Road might have existed in this digital world, but packages still had to get delivered. Money had to change hands. There had to be some kind of trail, right?
Oh, absolutely. And those trails, those real-world connections, that's exactly what the authorities, the FBI, the DEA, they were all over that, trying to untangle the web and find a way to bring the whole thing crashing down.
Makes sense. I mean, it couldn't stay hidden forever, but you've got to admit the feds going up against something like Silk Road, that's like a whole new world for them.
Oh, totally. I mean, this is uncharted territory, especially back then. For the FBI, it was like a crash course in the dark web. They even gave their investigation this code name, Operation Onion Pillar. I mean, that kind of says it all.
Operation Onion Pillar. Seriously?
Yep. They were learning as they went, trying to understand how Tor worked, how Bitcoin worked, all this new technology that was designed to keep things anonymous.
It's mind-boggling, really. So how did they even get started? Did they have any leads, or were they just shooting in the dark?
Well, they use a lot of high-tech tactics, but you might be surprised to learn that one of the biggest breaks in the case came from a pretty simple source.
Wait, seriously, they Googled Silk Road?
Not exactly. It was this IRS agent, Gary Alford. He was digging through all sorts of data, and he stumbled across something that just didn't add up. He was looking at online forums where people talked about Silk Road, and he noticed one user who seemed to know a little too much too early on. And get this, the username this guy was using was Altoid.
Altoid, like the breath mint.
Exactly. And you know what Ross's username was on these forums?
No way. Dread Pirate Roberts.
Nope. It was Altoid.
Get out. So this IRS agent, he basically brought down a digital kingpin because of a breath mint. That's crazy.
That's a wild story, right? But it shows that even in the age of all this complex technology, sometimes it's the old school methods that still work. But it wasn't just Alfred. The FBI was getting closer, too. They were starting to understand how Silk Road worked, how the money flowed, how to track the Bitcoin transactions. The net was closing in.
It sounds like something out of a movie. So what happened next?
Well, that's where things get even more complicated. Because right when the feds are closing in, this whole other character enters the picture. Curtis Green. Ever heard of him?
Curtis Green. Oh, yeah. Wasn't he like one of the main guys on Silk Road? Something about chronic pain?
That's the one. Chronic Pain was his online handle. He was like Ross's right-hand man, a moderator on the site, dealt with customer support, even offered advice on how to use certain substances safely.
So he was like the friendly face of a very not friendly operation.
Exactly. But here's where it gets crazy. Green gets busted by the DEA. And not just like a small-time bust. They found him with a kilo of cocaine.
Whoa. Talk about a plot twist. So was he a double agent or something?
That's what everyone wanted to know. Green claimed he was set up, that the cocaine was planted on him by a DEA agent named Karl Mark Force.
A DEA agent planting drugs. Come on, that sounds a little far-fetched, doesn't it?
I know, right? But it gets even crazier.
Okay, now you have to tell me.
Okay, so Force. He wasn't just any DEA agent. He was also deep undercover, posing as this Puerto Rican drug lord named Knob. And get this, he was trying to buy Silk Road from Ross.
Wait. So the same guy who's supposed to be bringing down Silk Road is also trying to buy it?
Yep, you got it?
What is going on? This is insane.
And it gets even wilder. Remember all those millions of dollars in Bitcoin that Silk Road was generating?
Yeah.
Turns out Force and another agent named Sean Bridges, they were allegedly skimming some of that Bitcoin off the top, using their positions to get rich.
Hold on. Are you telling me that the feds trying to take down Silk Road were also stealing from it?
Allegedly, yes. We've got allegations of a setup, corrupt agents, millions of dollars in missing Bitcoin.
This is insane. It's like the line between the good guys and the bad guys. It's all blurred. You can't tell who's who anymore.
That's the thing about the Silk Road story. It's not black and white. It's all shades of gray. And it gets even murkier when you factor in the allegations of those murder-for-hire plots.
So we've got all this intrigue, right? We've got undercover agents, missing Bitcoin, and even those alleged murder-for-hire plots. But eventually, all of this digital drama, it had to end up in a real-world courtroom.
It did. And the trial of Ross Ulbricht, it was a media frenzy. Remember, this was still kind of new territory. The whole Silk Road thing is new kind of crime. And the feds, they wanted to make an example out of Ross.
Right, because he's the mastermind, the Dread Pirate Roberts. But how do you even prove that in court? I mean, this whole thing was built on anonymity.
Exactly. And that was a huge challenge for the prosecution. They had to convince a jury that this Eagle Scout, this seemingly harmless guy, was behind this massive criminal enterprise. And they went all in on those murder-for-hire plots.
Because that paints a picture of him as dangerous, a threat.
But those were just messages, right? Did they ever actually prove that he tried to have anyone killed?
That's the thing. The alleged hits were never actually carried out, and the details were always super murky. The defense argued that Ross was being set up, that someone else was sending those messages, maybe even those corrupt agents we talked about, Forreston Bridges, to make him look bad.
So it could have been someone else posing as Dread Pirate Roberts online. Exactly. Remember, anonymity was like the whole point of Silk Road. It was practically built into the system, so it was definitely possible.
Man, that's crazy. So what did the jury think? Did they buy it?
In the end, the jury sided with the prosecution. Ross was found guilty on all charges: narcotics, trafficking, money laundering, hacking. They threw the book at him.
And he got that super harsh sentence, right? Life in prison, no parole.
Yeah, and it's a sentence that's still being debated today. Some people think justice was served, that he got what he deserved. They say he created a platform for suffering, even if he didn't intend for things to go that far.
And then there's the whole Free Ross movement who believe the punishment didn't fit the crime.
Right, they say he was made an example of. That the government wanted to send a message, don't mess with the internet. They also point to the corruption in the investigation, those agents who were stealing Bitcoin.
Yeah, that doesn't exactly scream fair trial, does it?
No, it doesn't. And it makes you think, doesn't it? About how much we really know about what went on behind the scenes.
It really does. It's like we've just scratched the surface of this whole thing.
I think that's the thing about the Silk Road story. It's not just about drugs or technology or even crime, really. It's about the choices we make, the consequences of our actions, and the unintended ripples they create in the world. Ross Ulbricht, he set out to create this online utopia, this free market paradise, but it spiraled out of control. And it really makes you think about the power and the potential dangers of technology in the wrong hands.
It does. And you know what else? It makes you appreciate the little things. Like, I'm never going to look at a pack of Altoids the same way again.
Right. Who knew breath mints could be so dangerous?
Seriously.
All right, everyone, get ready, because today we are really diving deep, and I mean really deep into the dark web. We're talking about dark web marketplaces, specifically Alphabay.
Alphabay.
You know, you might have heard about Silk Road.
Yeah?
This makes Silk Road look like, I don't know, a lemonade stand.
Right.
We're talking millions of dollars a day.
Yeah.
A mysterious kingpin. Everyone knows him as Alpha 2. And we got twists and turns. So many twists and turns. You ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so we're pulling from a really interesting video on this, and let me tell you, it's jam-packed with detail. It's really interesting how this whole thing started. So before Alphabay became like the Amazon of the dark web,
Right.
it was just a small-time operation focused on carding.
Yeah, that's right.
So imagine like stealing credit card information and then selling it online. That was their bread and butter.
Yeah, essentially like digital picking pockets.
Yeah. Digital pickpocketing, but with way higher stakes.
Way higher.
But then Alpha 2, the guy behind it all, he decided to dream bigger. He saw an opportunity to create a one-stop shop for anything illegal.
Yeah.
And that's how Alphabay was born. It's crazy how quickly it exploded.
Yeah, it's really quite remarkable. It just shows you that there is a demand out there, that people want to be able to buy and sell anonymously.
Right.
And this provided that platform for them.
Totally, totally.
And what's interesting, too, about Alpha 2, or at least what we've been able to gather, he didn't seem to be driven by any sort of ideology.
Really?
Yeah. He was very much about making money.
Okay.
He had his own set of rules. You know, he didn't want child exploitation on there.
Okay.
He didn't want any hits put out on people. And he also didn't want anyone targeting Russians.
Russians are off limits.
Russians are off limits.
Wow. So it's wild, right? It's like he was trying to create some warped sense of morality within this lawless space.
Yeah.
But make no mistake, this was all about making money.
Oh, yeah. This is a business.
And boy, did he ever.
At its peak, Alphabay was processing more transactions than every other dark web marketplace combined.
Are you serious?
Dead serious.
Yeah.
We're talking millions and millions of dollars every single day.
It's almost hard to fathom those kind of numbers. And get this, he wasn't exactly shy about his wealth either. We're talking about a guy who loved to flaunt it. Luxury cars, exotic vacations, basically living that high life most people only dream of. But, as they say, every empire crumbles. And in Alphabay's case, it was a vendor's simple mistake. That started the domino effect. They accidentally leaked an email address. giving investigators this tiny crack in Alpha-2's carefully constructed wall of anonymity.
Oh, boy.
And you know what they say about small cracks?
They get bigger.
So they got this email address right.
Right.
And they were able to do something with it.
Yeah, so this is a great example of how even in like the darkest corners of the internet, right? Like traditional investigative techniques still apply.
Really?
Oh, yeah. So they took this email address and they were able to run with it using something called open source intelligence.
Open source intelligence.
Or OSINT for short.
OSINT. Okay, so what is that?
So basically imagine piecing together this puzzle using only publicly available information.
Okay.
So they're going through social media profiles, online forums, dating sites, anything they can get their hands on.
That's related to this email address, and they hit the jackpot.
You're kidding me. They found Alpha-2 just by like snooping around the internet?
Basically, and keep in mind, this was before,
Okay.
facial recognition technology was as advanced as it is today.
Right.
These investigators were like the original digital detectives.
Wow. So what did they find? Like what kind of stuff was this guy posting?
So remember who we were talking about, his lavish lifestyle?
Yeah.
Turns out he wasn't exactly hiding it.
What?
Yeah, he had social media profiles under different names, of course,
Okay.
but he couldn't resist showing off a little bit.
Really?
Oh, yeah, photos of himself with his Lamborghini.
No way.
Oh, yeah, check-ins at fancy restaurants.
Yeah.
Posts about his travels.
So he was basically just bragging about all this illegal stuff for the whole world to see. It's kind of like he wanted to get caught.
I mean, what was he thinking?
It's really a fascinating psychological aspect of this case.
Yeah.
Like, did he truly believe he was untouchable?
Wow.
But the real goldmine
Okay.
came when they stumbled upon a forum called Rushby.
Rushby.
Alpha-2, or Rumo, as he called himself on the forum.
Rumo.
Yeah, used it as his own personal online diary.
Oh.
He'd write about his day, his thoughts, his anxieties. He really didn't hold back.
Wow, and he's posting about Alphabay on this forum, too.
He wasn't explicitly mentioning any illegal activity.
Okay.
He was careful enough for that. But reading between the lines, investigators really started to paint a more complete picture of the man behind the keyboard.
So they're building this psychological profile just based on his online ramblings. That's kind of creepy when you think about it. How much information we unknowingly give up about ourselves online.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it raises some interesting questions about privacy in the digital age.
Right.
But I think we can save that for another time.
Another time. Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms. So they got this treasure trove of information on Alpha-2. They know his real identity, his habits, his hangouts. They're ready to make their move. What happens next? So they've got him right. They're ready to make the arrest. What they do?
This is where it gets really interesting. We're talking a multi-agency operation, law enforcement from all over the world.
Wow.
The U.S., Thailand, Lithuania, even the Netherlands gets involved.
The Netherlands?
Yeah.
Okay.
They called it Operation Bayonet, and it was basically a global game of cyber chess.
Operation Bayonet.
Yeah.
Sounds intense.
It was. And they knew they needed to get this right.
Yeah.
Remember how important that encryption software was to Alphabay security?
Yeah.
They knew they needed to catch Alpha-2 red-handed, laptop open, logged into his account, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
They had to time it perfectly.
So how do you even begin to orchestrate something like that?
I know, right? It's not like you can just send the guy a meeting invite.
Right.
So they had to get creative.
Okay.
The plan they came up with.
Yeah.
Straight out of a movie.
Okay.
They staged a car crash.
What?
Undercover female police officers crashed a car right into his compound.
You're kidding.
Knowing that he'd come out to help.
Oh, wow.
It was risky, but they were counting on his personality, his chivalry. And you know what?
What?
It worked.
Wow. That's some next level police work.
Oh, yeah. They were committed to taking him down.
Wow. So they finally have him right. What happens next?
Well, remember how I mentioned the Netherlands?
Yeah.
So they were running their own operation targeting Hansa.
Right. Hansa, that was another big one.
Huge. And as luck would have it, at the precise moment that authorities were closing in on Alpha-2,
What happened?
the Dutch police, completely unaware of the other operation going on, took down Hansa's servers.
Wait, so they accidentally took down Alphabay's biggest competitor while he was about to be apprehended.
It's crazy, right?
That's insane.
Talk about coincidence.
You can't make this stuff up.
It's wild. And it created this unexpected opportunity. See, with Hansa offline,
Yeah.
a lot of its users were scrambling for alternatives. The Dutch police, they saw a chance to capitalize on this.
Okay.
And they did something incredibly bold.
What'd they do?
They resurrected Hansa.
They what?
Yeah, but here's the catch.
Okay.
They were now in control. They turned it into what's known as a honeypot.
A honeypot? What's that?
Essentially a fake marketplace designed to lure in criminals
Oh, wow.
and gather intelligence.
So they're catching criminals on two fronts now. They're shutting down Alphabay, and they're using Hansa as bait.
It was a genius, if not controversial, tactic.
Wow. What happened to Alpha 2, though?
That's where the story takes another tragic turn.
Okay.
While in custody, Alpha 2 was found dead in his cell.
Are you serious?
Apparent suicide.
He's caught after this elaborate international sting operation. And then that happens.
It's a strange and unsettling end to an already wild story.
It really is.
There were some suspicious circumstances surrounding his death, for sure.
Really?
Yeah, but the official ruling remained suicide.
What a bizarre and tragic end to this whole thing. I guess some mysteries are just never truly solved.
That's right. The story of Alphabay is a stark reminder that the choices we make both online and offline can have serious consequences.
Absolutely, and it leaves us with a lot to think about.
It really does. In an age where anonymity is both a shield and a weapon, who are we really trusting with our data, our privacy, our very identities?
It's a question worth pondering. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. It's been quite a journey. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, what happens on the internet doesn't always stay on the internet.
So the million-dollar question then is, how do we navigate this? Because, you're saying you need these constant updates and everything, but then it's like, as somebody who's just trying to live their life, how do I not drown in all of this information, right? How do you balance it?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? It's like, it's not about, none of us can be, cybersecurity experts overnight.
Yeah.
But it's about being aware, right? It's about developing a sense of what's important for you, for your digital life.
Right.
So, think about what kind of devices you use, what platforms you're on, where you bank, things like that. Start there.
Yeah.
And just focus on those areas. Think about what's one thing I could do this week to just be a little bit safer online.
Yeah.
It's about those small steps, but being consistent.
That's a really good point. It's not about being perfect. It's about, just those little things that you can do consistently. Well, there you have it, listeners, a little peek into the world of cybersecurity. And it is a fast-paced world, constantly evolving. So stay vigilant, stay aware, and be safe out there.